It was a Tuesday night, just like any other. I had spent the day at work, thinking about the anniversary dinner we'd planned for the evening. 15 years of marriage, and I thought we had it all. A beautiful home, a loving husband, and a future we were building together. But as I pulled into the driveway, everything I thought I knew began to crack. The car was parked in the driveway. Ethan's car. But something felt off. I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling in my gut. I grabbed my keys from the ignition and stepped out into the stillness of the evening. The door to the house was slightly ajar, as though it had been left open in a hurry. I took a deep breath, telling myself that maybe I was overthinking things, that it was just my anxiety playing tricks on me. But then I heard it, a muffled voice, then another. The voices were coming from upstairs. My heart began to race. I climbed the stairs slowly, unsure of what I would find. I reached the door to our bedroom and froze. Ethan's voice, filled with laughter, was unmistakable. But it wasn't just him. There was another voice, one I recognized all too well. My sister's, Claire. Sickening realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My mind raced back through the years, every small, odd moment that I had brushed off as nothing. All the signs were there, but I had been too blinded by love and trust to see them. I opened the door without knocking, the sound of the hinges louder than it should have been in the tense silence. Ethan and Claire both turned to face me. Ethan's face froze in shock, but Claire, ever the manipulator, only smiled. "Anna," she said, her voice soft but uncomfortably casual. I didn't expect you home so early." My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could hear was the pounding of my heart in my ears. I was paralyzed, staring at them both. "What's going on?" I managed to ask, though the words felt foreign in my mouth. Ethan stood, the guilt obvious on his face. "Anna, But I didn't let him finish. The truth was clear, and I didn't need his words to confirm it. "You're cheating on me," I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of the accusation. Claire stood up now, moving toward me with a look that seemed almost rehearsed. "It's not what you think," she started, but her words were hollow. The betrayal was evident in her eyes. Tears began to well up in my eyes, but I fought them back. I wouldn't let them see me break. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It's not what it looks like, Anna," Ethan stammered, clearly panicked. But I wasn't listening anymore. The world I thought I knew had shattered. The man I trusted with my heart, the woman who was supposed to be my sister, had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, hearing Ethan and Claire call after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stay another moment in that house, in that life. The cool night air hit me like a slap in the face as I stepped outside. I felt numb. A whirlwind of emotions swirled in my chest. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak. But beneath it all, something else began to grow. A simmering rage. They thought they could get away with this. They thought I wouldn't fight back. But they were wrong. As I stood there, facing the dark night, I made a silent vow. I would not let them get away with. This wasn't just about love. It was about revenge. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I couldn't escape the images of Ethan and Claire together, their betrayal lingering in every corner of my mind. I barely ate. I barely slept. All I could do was replay that night over and over, in my head, trying to make sense of it all. How could they have done this to me? Ethan called, texted, and even showed up at the house, but I refused to answer. I needed time to think, time to process what had happened and decide what came next. The anger I felt was all-consuming, but I couldn't let it cloud my judgment. I had to be smart. I had to plan. I spent hours on the phone with my lawyer, Miss Harper, who had already begun looking into the legal ramifications of the situation. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity. I was dealing with something far worse. A betrayal that involved money, family, and my future. Miss Harper was sharp, confident, and reassuring. "We'll make sure they pay for what they've done," she told me. "We'll go after the inheritance, everything that's rightfully yours. The law is on your side." Her words gave me a sense of calm, but deep down I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Ethan and Claire would fight back, and they would fight dirty. They had a lot at stake, more than I ever imagined. Ethan's business was on the brink of collapse, and Claire's desperation to secure her future made her more dangerous than ever. But it didn't matter. I had a plan, and I would execute it with precision. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I needed to remind myself that I was stronger than they thought. As I walked down the familiar streets of our neighborhood, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the end of the block. Ethan. He had been trying to reach me for days, but I hadn't given him the satisfaction of a response. Still, something about seeing him there, so out of place, so vulnerable, stirred something in me. Was it guilt? Or was it the beginning of my own dark desire for revenge? I approached him slowly, my heart pounding. Ethan looked up, and his eyes softened with hope. He took a step toward me, as if expecting me to welcome him with open arms. "Anna," he said, his voice full of regret. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but I need to explain." I crossed my arms, my gaze cold. "Explain? How do you explain this, Ethan? How do you explain betraying me with my own sister?" His face twisted with shame, but he didn't back down. "I don't know. I don't have an excuse. But it was a mistake, Anna. I love you. I never wanted to hurt you." The words were empty, meaningless. He had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now he was trying to talk his way out of it. I couldn't believe a word that came out of his mouth. "You think I'm just going to forgive you?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "That I'll just forget everything?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him standing there. But as I walked, I felt a shift within myself. It wasn't just the hurt anymore. It wasn't just the betrayal. There was something more, something darker, a burning desire for revenge. I would make them both regret this. The weeks that followed were agonizing. I could feel Ethan and Claire closing in, trying to manipulate the situation, hoping I'd break and give in. But there was no way I would let them win. My resolve had hardened, and now I was prepared to fight. I spent countless hours researching, talking to Miss Harper, and strategizing my next move. I knew that Claire was more dangerous than I had first imagined. She was cunning, calculating. She had been playing this game for years. But she underestimated me. I wasn't the naive woman she thought I was anymore. One evening, as I was reviewing some documents, I received a call from Ethan. I almost didn't answer it, but something in me urged me to. Was it curiosity, or was it the desire to hear him grovel for the mess he had created? I picked up the phone. "Anna, please, I know I've made a huge mistake," Ethan began, his voice laced with desperation. "I know I've lost your trust, but I'm asking for one chance, for us to fix this." I almost laughed at how pathetic he sounded. "Fix this? After everything you've done?" I said, my tone cold and unyielding. "I was stupid, Anna. It wasn't meant to happen like this. I love you. I want us to work this out," he pleaded, trying to sound sincere. I could feel the rage boiling inside me, but I held it in check. "You don't get to decide that, Ethan. You lost your chance the moment you slept with my sister. You're the one who ruined everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him trying to formulate a response that would get him back in my good graces. But it wasn't going to work. Not this time. "I'm not done, Anna," he said finally, his voice hardening. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." "You don't understand," I said quietly, but with a tone so full of conviction, it made him pause. "There's nothing left to fix. You've already shown me who you are." I hung up before he could say another word. That night, I spent hours plotting my next move. Ethan and Claire thought they could take everything from me, but they were wrong. There was one thing they hadn't anticipated: my determination to fight back, and my willingness to go to any lengths to make sure they paid for their betrayal. Was done playing nice. The next morning, I met with Miss Harper to discuss the legal actions we could take. We needed to find a way to expose Ethan's financial troubles and use that to my advantage. We also discussed the possibility of going after Claire directly, revealing her lies about the pregnancy. There were holes in her story that we could exploit in court. "It's time to hit them where it hurts," Miss Harper said with a sly smile. "We'll use their weaknesses against them." I nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction. This was just the beginning. I knew that Ethan and Claire would come after me harder now. They would try to manipulate me, guilt-trip me, or worse, try to offer me a deal. But there was no going back. I had made up my mind. The only thing that mattered now was making them pay. The following week, I received a letter from Ethan's attorney. It was an attempt to settle the matter outside of court. They offered me a deal that was supposed to seem generous: half of the inheritance, a financial settlement, and a promise to keep the family drama out of the public eye. I tore the letter up without a second thought. There was no amount of money that could make up for what they had done. No compromise was going to fix the destruction they had caused in my life. Ethan and Claire thought they could buy their way out of this, but they had no idea what was coming. After rejecting Ethan's offer, I knew the battle was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. The legal game had started, but the emotional manipulation was still in play, and I had to stay one step ahead of them. Ethan had always been a smooth talker, but now I saw him for what he truly was: a man desperate to keep his secrets buried. He wasn't just after the inheritance. He was trying to cover up his spiraling business and protect himself from the financial ruin that was knocking at his door. I spent the next few days laying low, letting them believe I was just going to play it safe. But deep down, I was preparing for something bigger. I contacted a private investigator, someone who could dig into Ethan's business dealings. I needed evidence, something undeniable that would make him crumble under the weight of his lies. The investigator's report came back the next week, and it was worse than I could have imagined. Ethan's company was on the brink of collapse, riddled with unpaid debts and bad investments. But there was more, much more. Ethan had been using the inheritance money as collateral to secure loans. He had no intention of ever repaying them, and if the creditors found out he was trying to get his hands on more of my father's estate, they'd take it all. I couldn't wait to make this public. But before I could take action, Claire reached out to me again. This time, it wasn't a desperate plea for help. It was a warning. "Anna," Claire's voice trembled on the other end of the phone. "You don't know what you're doing. If you go after Ethan, you'll ruin everything. This is bigger than the inheritance. This could destroy both of us." I could hear the fear in her voice, but I wasn't moved. She and Ethan had destroyed my life already, and now they wanted to play the victim? "Too bad," I replied coldly. "You should have thought about that before you both decided to betray me." There was a long pause, and then Claire spoke again, this time with a hint of desperation. "I'll make it right, Anna. I will. Just don't do this, please." "You had your chance, Claire. You made your bed. Now lie in it." I hung up before she could say anything more. Now it was time to strike. I took the investigator's report and met with Miss Harper to discuss how we could use it. We had a powerful weapon in our hands. We could expose Ethan's financial mess and his use of the inheritance funds. This wasn't just about legal victory anymore. This was about public humiliation, ensuring that Ethan and Claire would never recover from this. We need to make sure this information leaks at the right time, Miss Harper said. We can't just file it in court. We need to make it so. Public. It forces their hand. I agreed. This wasn't just about winning in a courtroom. It was about showing them that their lies and manipulations would have consequences. Later that week, I leaked the report to a local news outlet, careful to keep my involvement anonymous. It didn't take long for the story to go viral. Ethan's business was exposed, his creditors lined up to take legal action, and the public began to question everything about his so-called success. But what shocked Ethan the most was the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The people who had once adored him, the ones he had charmed with his wealth and success, started turning their backs. The social media backlash was swift. He was no longer the charming, successful businessman he once claimed to be. He was the man who had tried to steal from his own family. The tension was palpable, but it didn't stop there. Claire reached out again, her tone more frantic now than before. "Anna, you've ruined everything," she said. "You don't understand what you've done." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "You and Ethan thought you could destroy my life for your gain, but it's not happening. Not on my watch." I ended the call and sat back, letting the satisfaction of my small victory wash over me. But I knew this was just the beginning. Ethan and Claire were cornered now. They would fight back with everything they had, and I was ready. The public fallout from the leaked report hit Ethan and Claire harder than I expected. Ethan's business partners began distancing themselves, and creditors began circling, like vultures eager to feast on the remnants of his empire. The reality of his crumbling facade was a bitter pill for him to swallow, but it was only the beginning. Claire, on the other hand, seemed to spiral even further. Her earlier desperation now took on an almost frantic energy. I could feel the weight of her attempts to manipulate me through the phone, but I was no longer the same woman who would listen to her pleas. As the days passed, I watched from the sidelines, knowing that their lives were beginning to unravel piece by piece. But despite the chaos, I could sense they were planning something. Ethan wasn't the kind of man to go down without a fight. And Claire, well, she was just as deceitful and calculating as ever. I wasn't just fighting for the inheritance anymore. It had grown far beyond that. It was about redemption. It was about ensuring that they didn't win, no matter what it took. The following week, Ethan made his move. A lawyer representing his business interests contacted me, claiming that my recent actions had caused irreparable harm to Ethan's company and that he intended to sue for damages. The nerve. I knew it was a bluff, a last-ditch effort to scare me into backing down, but I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I had the truth on my side, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. I met with Miss Harper to discuss the situation. She listened carefully, then smirked. "This is just their desperation. Talking," she said. "But we'll need to play it smart. We can't let them control the narrative. You're not the one in the wrong here, but they'll do anything to make it look like you are." "Then let's make sure everyone knows the truth," I replied. "This isn't just about money anymore. It's about exposing who they really are." That night, as I was reviewing some legal documents, I received another unexpected call. It was from Claire. "Anna, you don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "Ethan's threatening to take me down with him. He says if I don't help him fix this, we'll both lose everything. I can't lose it all, Anna. I can't." I clenched my jaw. Claire had always been selfish, always looking out for her own interests, even at the cost of everyone else. Now, she was begging me for help after everything they had put me through? "I'm not your savior, Claire," I said, my voice cold. You and Ethan have done enough damage. Now you'll face the consequences of your own actions." Her silence, on the other end of the line, was deafening. For a moment, I thought she might say something else, something that would make me rethink my decision. But no. She hung up, leaving me with nothing but the sound of her voice fading into nothing. It was clear now. Ethan and Claire were trying to hold on to a crumbling empire that had no chance of surviving. The weight of their lies was catching up to them, and they didn't know how to stop it. But I had already won. The pieces were falling into place. My next move was crucial. The following day, I scheduled a meeting with Miss Harper to finalize my next steps. I wasn't going to let this drag on for much longer. The longer this dragged out, the more they could attempt to manipulate the situation. I needed to finish this, once and for all. "We're going to court," Miss Harper said with certainty as we discussed our strategy. "But this time, we take the high ground. We show them for what they are. Liars, manipulators, and criminals. We win not just for the inheritance, but for everything they've stolen from you." I nodded. I wasn't doing this just for me. I was doing it for my father's legacy, for everything he had worked for. It wasn't just about the money. It was about showing that betrayal would not go unpunished. That evening, as I sat alone in my living room, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I had done everything I could. The next step was in motion, and I was ready to take them down, piece by piece. The days leading up to the court date were filled with a strange mixture of anticipation and calm. I had spent years letting the anger and betrayal fester. But now, it wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice. As the date of the court hearing loomed, I felt a deep sense of resolve settle over me. I wasn't just fighting for an inheritance anymore. I was fighting to expose the truth, to reclaim the life they had stolen from me. For so long, I had let Ethan and Claire's lies control my thoughts, my emotions, even my decisions. Now, they would see what it felt like to be exposed, to face the consequences of their actions. The news of Ethan's financial ruin had already spread. His creditors were relentless, and it seemed like every day another business partner dropped, him like a hot potato. Even Claire, who had once been so sure of her place in their twisted partnership, was beginning to show cracks. The desperation in her voice had been unmistakable, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as I saw them both crumble. But I couldn't let my guard down. I knew how dangerous they were when cornered. Their pride was their greatest weakness, and they would do anything to save face, even if it meant pulling out every dirty trick in the book. I couldn't afford to underestimate them now. I spent the nights leading up to the trial preparing. Miss Harper had made it clear that we needed to be strategic, that the fight wouldn't be easy. Ethan and Claire had a history of playing dirty, of twisting the truth to their advantage. But we had something they didn't: integrity. I reviewed every piece of evidence again, making sure every detail was in place. I didn't want any room for error. This was my chance to take control, to put an end to this nightmare once and for all. The night before the court hearing, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The events of the past few months played through my mind like a movie. I thought about the woman I had been before all of this, the naive, trusting sister who never saw the betrayal coming. I thought about my father, who had worked so hard to provide for us, only to have his legacy tainted by their greed. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I had become someone stronger, someone who would no longer allow herself to be manipulated or deceived. I had fought my way through every twist and turn, and now I was on the verge of taking back what was mine. The morning of the court hearing, I dressed carefully, choosing a simple yet elegant outfit that reflected the seriousness of the occasion. I wanted to walk into that courtroom with confidence, to show Ethan and Claire that I wasn't afraid of them anymore. As I arrived at the courthouse, I noticed Claire sitting in the lobby. She was dressed in black, her face pale and drawn. She looked nothing like the confident, scheming woman I had once known. I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph, knowing that she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. She saw me and quickly looked away, as though pretending I didn't exist would make everything go away. But I knew she was watching me, waiting for me to make the first move. I didn't. I walked past her without a word, straight to the courtroom where Miss Harper was already waiting. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was tense. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had heard it all before, looked at us with a practiced gaze. I could see Ethan and Claire sitting together, their faces masks of anger and frustration. But I wasn't intimidated. As the proceedings began, I could feel my nerves steadying. Miss Harper was precise and unyielding in her arguments, dismantling each of Ethan and Claire's claims with cold, hard facts. The evidence was irrefutable, and as I sat there watching them squirm, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The judge's eyes flicked back and forth between the two sides, her expression unreadable. I knew she wasn't fooled by their lies, just as I wasn't. I was on the edge of my seat, waiting for the moment when the final judgment would be delivered. It came sooner than I expected. The judge cleared her throat and looked directly at us. After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimonies, it is clear that the claims made by the defendants are without merit. The inheritance in question will remain with the rightful beneficiary, Anna. I felt a surge of relief, a wave of triumph that washed over me like a cleansing tide. But the real victory wasn't in the judgment. It was in knowing that I had fought for what was right, that I had reclaimed my life from the hands of betrayal. Ethan and Claire sat in stunned silence, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and anger. But I didn't care anymore. The battle was over. The aftermath of the court ruling hit Ethan and Claire like a storm. The air was thick with tension as they left the courtroom, their faces twisted in disbelief. But I could see the cracks in their facade. They had been so sure of their victory, convinced that their lies would win them everything. But the truth had prevailed, and now they had to face the consequences. The judge's decision had sealed their fate, but it wasn't just the legal defeat that rattled them. It was the humiliation, the very public exposure of their deceit. Ethan had been walking around like a man who owned the world, his arrogance blinding him to the fact that everything was slipping through his fingers. And Claire, once so full of herself, now appeared fragile, like a deflated balloon. I watched them leave the courthouse together, their shoulders hunched in defeat. They tried to put on a brave front, but the cracks were obvious. I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction watching them struggle. For once, the tables had turned, but this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The day after the hearing, I met with Miss Harper to go over the next steps. There was still the matter of the estate to deal with, the division of assets, and the inevitable fallout from Ethan and Claire's defeat. But I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let them drag this out any longer. I was done with them. "I'm glad we won," I said, looking at the lawyer. "But I don't want to waste any more time on this. I want it finished. I want closure." Miss Harper nodded, her eyes sharp with understanding. "I agree. You've done everything you can. The legal proceedings are almost over. It's time to move on." I left her office feeling lighter than I had in months, knowing that the battle was finally nearing its end. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to come. Ethan and Claire weren't the type to take defeat lying down. I knew they would find a way to make things difficult, even if it meant playing dirty. Sure enough, just a few days later, I received a call that made my blood run cold. "Anna, you need to come to the hospital. It's about Claire." My heart dropped. Claire? What had happened? I grabbed my coat and rushed to the hospital, the fear and uncertainty gnawing at me with every step. When I arrived, I found Claire sitting in a hospital room, her eyes red from crying. She looked small and vulnerable in that moment, completely different from the confident woman I had once known. Ethan was by her side, his face twisted with concern, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Claire looked up at me, her expression a mixture of regret and guilt. I didn't know who else to turn to," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What?" I whispered, struggling to comprehend what she was saying. "You?" "No," she interrupted, shaking her head. "It's not Ethan's. It's not his." I stared at her, confused and shocked. "Then whose is it?" Claire's voice was barely audible as she whispered, It's my ex-husband's. I don't know what to do. Ethan's been so good to me, and now this. I can't tell him. He'll leave me." I stood there frozen as the weight of her words sank in. The woman who had ruined my life, the woman who had betrayed me, was now asking me for help. It was beyond ironic, beyond twisted. "You lied to me about everything, Claire," I said, my voice cold. "And now you want me to help you? After everything you've done?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached out, grabbing my hand. "Please, Anna. Please don't tell Ethan. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I've lost everything. And I'm scared. I need your help." I looked down at her hand, and for a moment, I saw the woman who had been my sister. But that feeling quickly faded. "Do you remember when you lied to me about being pregnant to manipulate Dad's will?" I asked, my voice icy. "Do you remember how you destroyed our family with your lies? And now you want me to fix your mess?" She didn't answer. Instead, she just cried, the tears flowing freely now. I stood up, taking a step back. "No, Claire. I'm done helping you. You made your choices. Now live with the consequences." With that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her behind. Ethan tried to follow me, but I ignored him. He wasn't worth my time anymore. As I left the hospital, I realized that Claire's plea for help had been the final attempt at manipulation. She wanted me to fix her broken life, just like she had tried to fix everything by using me. But I wasn't her savior, and I wasn't going to be her fall guy anymore. The day of reckoning had arrived for both of them, and no one could save them now. The weeks that followed my confrontation with Claire at the hospital were filled with a heavy silence. Ethan and Claire, despite their desperate pleas, had made no real effort to apologize or take responsibility for their actions. Instead, they continued to spiral deeper into their own mess, their desperate attempts at salvaging their crumbling lives becoming more and more apparent. The media began to pick up on their downfall, fueled by their failed business and the exposure of their lies regarding the inheritance. Ethan's once thriving empire was now reduced to a pile of debt, and Claire, the woman who had once manipulated everyone around her, was now a shell of her former self. She couldn't hide from the reality of her actions any longer. The headlines told the story of their greed and deceit, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction watching their world burn. But deep down, I knew it wasn't enough. I hadn't just wanted them to lose. I wanted them to understand the depth of their betrayal, to truly grasp what they had taken from me. As the media frenzy continued, I received a call from Miss Harper. There was a new development in the case regarding the estate. One of Ethan's business partners had come forward, claiming that he had been manipulated by Ethan into signing fraudulent documents. It seemed that Ethan's lies stretched far beyond the family. I met with Miss Harper to discuss the implications. "This could change everything," she said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "If we can prove that Ethan's actions were criminal, it could significantly impact his claim to the estate. The stakes are higher than we thought." I nodded, my mind racing. This was it. This was the final blow that would truly end their hold over me and the legacy my father had left behind. Ethan had thought he could outsmart everyone, including the law. But now he was facing the consequences of his actions in a way he never anticipated. But I couldn't just let it go. I needed to make sure that they both knew that their downfall wasn't just about money or inheritance. It was about the lives they had destroyed in the process. I decided to take matters into my own hands. One evening, I visited the now empty mansion that Ethan and Claire had once called home. It was eerie, like a ghost of its former self, with empty rooms that echoed with the memories of their manipulation and greed. I walked through the hallways, my heart cold, but my resolve stronger than ever. I stood in the living room, staring at the spot where I had once shared a family dinner with Claire and Ethan, unaware of their treachery. The memories flooded back, memories of the laughter, the smiles, and the lies. It was all a facade, a carefully crafted illusion that had crumbled to dust. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to Claire. "You've lost everything, Claire. The estate is mine. Your lies, your manipulations, they've all come to light. And this is just the beginning. I won't stop until you understand the full weight of what you've done." I stared at the screen, watching as the message sent. There was no turning back now. Within minutes, I received a reply from Claire. Her words were frantic, filled with desperation. "Anna, please don't do this. We can fix this. We can still make things right." Her words were empty, just more of the same manipulative tactics she had used for years. I didn't respond. Instead, I took a screenshot of her message and sent it to Miss Harper. This would be the final nail in their coffin. The following day, the news broke. Ethan's business partner had gone public with the allegations of fraud, and the authorities were launching an investigation into Ethan's illegal activities. The media was all over it. Ethan's name was now synonymous with scandal and deceit. The courtroom drama that followed was intense, but Miss Harper's strategy was flawless. With the evidence we had gathered, Ethan and Claire had no way out. Their once lavish lifestyle was now a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of legal battles and financial ruin. As the trial progressed, I watched as Ethan and Claire tried to salvage their reputation, but it was too late. The lies they had built their lives on were crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. But even as they struggled, I couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about closure, about finally freeing myself from the chains of betrayal that had bound me for so long. The final blow came when the judge ruled in my favor, once again. The estate was officially mine, and with it, the legacy of my father. Ethan and Claire were left with nothing but the shattered remnants of their once glamorous lives. As I left the courthouse, the weight of it all finally hit me. I had won, but at what cost? The pain of betrayal still lingered, but I knew one thing for sure. I was free. Free from the lies, free from the manipulation, and free to rebuild my life without them. The world they had built for themselves had fallen apart, and in the end, it was their own greed that had destroyed them. The courtroom doors closed behind me with a heavy thud, signaling the end of what had been a brutal, life-altering battle. I had won. The inheritance, the legacy my father had worked so hard to build, was officially mine. But as I stood there, I couldn't help but feel a strange emptiness inside me. For so long, this had been the goal, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Yet, as the last of the legal papers were signed, the reality set in. Ethan and Claire were truly defeated, and I felt nothing but the remnants of betrayal. It had been a long, hard road, but in the end, the victory was hollow. I thought of the months leading up to this moment, the sleepless nights, the endless meetings with Miss Harper, the tears and anger that had fueled my drive for revenge. What had it all amounted to? Was this what I had really wanted? My phone buzzed in my hand, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Claire. Anna, please, you've won. But I need you to understand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Ethan was out of control, and I was just trying to protect us. Protect our future. I was scared. The message felt like a slap in the face. She was still trying to manipulate me, still trying to paint herself as the victim in all of this. After everything that had happened, after everything she had done, she still couldn't take responsibility. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keys. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell her exactly how I felt. But I knew better. She wasn't worth the energy. I blocked her number and deleted the message. This was over. As the days passed, the media frenzy died down. The headlines shifted, and Ethan's name became just another scandal in the sea of celebrity gossip. But for me, the real battle was just beginning. I had reclaimed the inheritance, but I still had to rebuild my life from the wreckage they had left behind. Miss Harper called me the following day, her voice filled with a rare warmth. Anna, it's over. You've won. And now it's time to move forward. You've proven your strength, but it's time to let go of the past. I took her words to heart. It was time. Time to stop looking back. To stop letting the past haunt me. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control my future. I could rebuild. I took a long walk that evening. My thoughts a whirlwind. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city. It was beautiful, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. I was free. Free from the manipulation, free from the betrayal, and free to live my life on my own terms. I returned to my apartment that night, feeling a sense of finality. The constant pressure, the anxiety, the need for revenge, it was all gone. And as I sat down, I realized that this chapter of my life had come to a close. I had learned so much about myself, about resilience, about strength, and about forgiveness, not for them, but for me. But even as I embraced my newfound freedom, I knew that the story wasn't truly over. Ethan and Claire had taken so much from me, but they had also given me something invaluable: the clarity to see what really mattered. It was no longer about revenge or anger. It was about healing, about moving forward, and about taking control of my own destiny. The final chapter of my story had come to a close, but I wasn't sure where the next one would lead. I had won the battle for the inheritance, but that victory had come with a cost. Years of emotional pain, shattered trust, and the death of a relationship with a sister I had once loved. Yet, as I stood on the precipice of this new chapter in my life, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had always thought that revenge would be the thing that healed me, that reclaiming my father's legacy would somehow erase the wounds of betrayal. But the truth was, it hadn't. The victory was sweet, but it wasn't the cure-all I had imagined. I had spent so much time focusing on my anger, on punishing Claire and Ethan for what they had done to me, that I had neglected the most important thing: my own healing. The days that followed the court ruling were filled with reflection. I spent time with friends who had supported me from the beginning, and I surrounded myself with people who didn't have hidden motives or dark agendas. I focused on rediscovering who I was before the betrayals, before the lies and manipulations had clouded my vision. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I still thought about Claire and Ethan, when the memories of their deception crept back into my mind. But every time that happened, I reminded myself that I had won. I had survived. And that was enough. One evening, as I sat in my garden watching the sunset, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about revenge or losing a part of my family. It was about reclaiming my life. I was no longer defined by their betrayal. I was defined by my resilience, by the strength I had found within myself to rise above their games. It was time to rebuild. Not just my wealth, but my life, my dreams, my future. I had always wanted to travel, to see the world beyond the confines of my old life. I had always wanted to start my own business, to build something that was truly mine. And now, I could. For the first time in years, I could see a future that wasn't clouded by resentment, fear, or anger. The phone buzzed in my pocket, interrupting my thoughts. It was a message from an old friend, a reminder that life was still moving forward, even if I wasn't sure where I was headed yet. The message simply said, "Are you ready for a fresh start? I have a proposition for you. Let's talk." I smiled to myself, knowing that this was just the beginning of something new, something free from the chains of my past. The next few months were a blur of new opportunities and personal growth. I invested the inheritance in a business venture that brought me joy, helping others rebuild their lives, just as I had rebuilt mine. I found myself slowly letting go of the weight of the past, focusing instead on the present and the future. One day, as I looked out over my new office, I felt a sense of fulfillment I hadn't known in years. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I had learned to forgive, not for them, but for me. I had learned to move on, to rise above, and to build a life that was truly mine. And as I closed the door to my office that evening, I smiled, knowing that no matter what happened next, I was finally free.